this unique ability to experience pleasure and pain, and why that gives humans a particular special opportunity for growth, I think is a bit illuminating as well. So yeah, really, really nice to be down here with you all. So my name is Amalayodhin, and yeah, a relief to be in front of people teaching again as well. So I've just popped down from the London Buddhist Centre. Everybody here just invited me very kindly. So I'm going to talk a little bit initially. I'm going to introduce very broadly the topic for discussion this evening, which will be the human situation. So 10 minutes on the human situation. Yeah, that's the task I've been given. So I think the first thing to say about this is, so in the Buddhist tradition, human beings exist within a sort of plethora, a great big kind of enormous cosmos of beings. So you open the recorded word of the Buddha, and all of a sudden you're introduced to goblins and demons and elves and gods and goddesses and all of these, and ghosts and tree spirits and all of these various beings, these entities. So it's such a rich world, the Buddhist sort of cosmology in that sense. It's so any idea that that Buddhism was some sort of scientific, rational spirituality or religion, depending on how you want to phrase it, is definitely sort of eliminated when you read the word of the Buddha. He talked to all of these tree spirits and gods and goddesses, and it's huge. That's the other thing to say about it. Absolutely enormous. I mean, just stretches the mind, and I think is designed to stretch the mind. There's thousands, tens of thousands of gods and goddesses and hell beings and all of these things, and you get these stories, these parables where they all sort of come together and the Buddha preaches to them, and so many of them become enlightened, or however, various sort of happenings. So it's a really kind of rich, colourful world, the Buddhist world. That's probably the first thing to say about it. And human beings exist within that. They exist within this sort of great big kind of continuum of consciousness. One way you could think of it as a sort of continuum of consciousness. And one of the things I think that sort of shows is that for Buddhism, human beings don't actually hold a particularly unique position. Not like, say, in Christianity or Islam or the other theisms, where human beings have been made by a creator God to a certain extent, and so hold a very unique sort of special place. In Buddhism, actually, human beings are connected to all life through a sort of continuum of consciousness. And traditionally it's said that human beings can move sort of up and down that continuum of consciousness as well. So, from this human existence, depending on what we do with our minds, we can sort of move up the continuum and become gods or goddesses. Or we could move down it and we can become hell beings. Now, of course, that's all assuming rebirth, which Buddhism certainly does, and the Buddha did. It's assumed rebirth, that once we died from our human forms, that we could be reborn again in a human form, or in a different form, in a form, a body of light. That's what I'm shooting for. I want to come back as a body of light. It's my back's hurting me at the moment, and you don't get back pain as a body of light, so that's what I want to come back as. So human beings exist within a sort of continuum of energy. You could just describe it as a sort of continuum of energy, and depending on what we do with our minds, we can move up or down that continuum. So yeah, for Buddhism, form, i.e. the form that we appear now, be it human or animal or plant or god or goddess or whatever it might be, is secondary, and what's primary is energy. So the energy shifts and changes. So there's no particular essence to a human being or to us as individuals that carries through time. There's no soul, there's no human soul there, I suppose, is what the Buddha was saying. We change, we shift depending on what we do with our minds, and we can shift totally radically out of the human form into another one. Yeah. So there's a continuum of consciousness that links human beings to all life. Also, probably what I should say about that as well is links us to animal life as well, so that particularly the emphasis on kindness towards animal life as well, and particularly not eating animals and treating them well, and all of that has tended to be a Buddhist emphasis down through the years as well, because there's no particular distinction between animals and humans. I mean, there's obviously a distinction on some level, but the distinction isn't absolute. Animals can raise to the level of human consciousness under this particular theory, and human beings can fall back to the level of animal consciousness. It's interesting, in Tibet, for example, they read the Buddha's word, the Dharma, to the goats. The goats get to hear the Dharma, and that's in the hope that the goats will have a favourable rebirth as human beings. Similarly in Tibetan Buddhism, there's lots of sort of small rules that if you do this, you'll come back as a sheep or something like that. So there's this really kind of rich kind of continuum between animals and human beings and higher life forms. Yeah. So there's a continuum of consciousness, but you could also describe that as a hierarchy of consciousness as well. So there's a hierarchy of consciousness there, and it goes from all the way from very sort of basic life to, say, plant life, and then to animal consciousness, which sort of is grown a bit more. There's sort of a kind of a greater sense of awareness with animal consciousness, and then to human consciousness, which has self-reflexiveness. So with human beings, for example, we know that I am, that we have a self, and that we act. We're aware of that. Animals, apparently, science is finding that they have some variant of that as well, but not as much as human beings. They're not as aware of it as human beings. So on that basis, that realization of self-consciousness is a sort of growth in awareness in some sense, and then upwards from that. So there's a hierarchy of consciousness. I know hierarchy isn't often the most popular. It's not the most popular thing these days, is it? But as soon as you have a value system, you have a hierarchy, don't you? If we have values, we have a hierarchy. If we have a value of love, well, there are more or less loving beings, for example, or there's more or less loving mental states. If we have a value of patience or generosity, there's more or less generosity. There's beings that are more or less generous. Buddhism particularly puts a value on awareness. Yeah? So as soon as you have a value on awareness, you have a hierarchy of awareness, and humans exist within a sort of hierarchy of awareness, from plants to animals to humans, and then higher up to even the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So for Buddhism, human consciousness, human awareness, self-reflexiveness isn't supreme. It can keep on going. It can keep on going until enlightenment and become enlightened consciousness. So it's interesting, isn't it? I suppose in some ways, why should it stop with human beings? I mean, sometimes we sort of think, oh no, there couldn't be, this is it, surely. Like, what would enlightened consciousness be like? We couldn't possibly imagine that. But if you think about it, I mean, why should it really stop with human beings? If there's plant consciousness and animal consciousness and human consciousness, and there's that sort of hierarchy or continuum, why would that stop there? So the Buddha says it doesn't stop there, actually. It does continue on to a Buddha's consciousness or an enlightened consciousness, whereby this whole sense of self kind of drops away, and we sort of come into a connection with all life. So I won't say too much about that. So there is a hierarchy of consciousness. And human consciousness is not the highest. So it exists within a sort of cosmology of kind of hierarchy in that sense, but also human beings exist within a sort of hierarchy of consciousness as well. So some human beings aren't particularly aware. I'm not particularly aware, for example, and I know people who are much sort of further along this kind of this continuum of love, of patience, of generosity, of awareness, of all of those things, and they're much more kind of more developed than me in that sense. So human beings also sort of exist within this continuum, which goes all the way up until enlightenment. And we can make progress on that. That's the other thing that the Buddha really kind of emphasized, that whoever we are, we can make, if we watch our mental states, if we're ethical, if we meditate, if we develop awareness, if we're loving, generous, friendly, all of those things, robust, courageous, all of those things, we can make progress on that path, or that hierarchy unto enlightenment, all the way to a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. Yeah. So one of the things that sort of does make humans kind of relatively unique in this kind of Buddhist cosmology or system is that they're according to the Buddha and according to all the Buddhist schools after that, there's a particular sort of unique opportunity with human beings. Now I'm assuming here we all believe in kind of like rebirth and things like that, which is a massive assumption, but this is what I'm sort of kind of like this is the kind of system, this is the thinking that kind of comes with this whole system of philosophy. So human beings exist particularly in a kind of special place in terms of our ability to gain enlightenment, particularly because of this unique sort of middle ground that we have in our ability to experience both pleasure or pain. So last week, I believe there was somebody came along to talk about the wheel of life and the various kind of realms, the worlds that consciousness, that beings can kind of exist in, and they're again in this Buddhist cosmology, there are hell realms, there are God realms, there are Titan realms, there are hungry ghost realms. There's all these various realms, and the human state is a particularly unique opportunity in this whole system of thought. It's a really kind of valuable, unique opportunity. For this reason, that we can experience kind of both pleasure and pain. Now, it's interesting, is it? Because I don't think we have to sort of accept this whole school of thought to see why this might be useful to think about in our own lives. Because, well, why is it useful for human beings to experience both pleasure and pain? Or to have access to both pleasure and pain. The gods, for example, only experience pleasure, and the hell beings only ever experience pain. Now, this can be sort of understood metaphorically as well. You can, for example, imagine the God realm as a particular sort of psychological state that a lot of human beings sort of inhabit. And we've met these people, haven't we? We've sort of met God realm folks. They're just sort of happy all the time, and they're fantastic looking, and they're healthy, and intelligent, and like they speak 10 languages, and they're all it's just like you just sort of kind of want to poke them, like, is there anything you feel pain or something like that? So there are, you could think of it metaphorically as well. There are these human beings that experience the God realm. And you could think of it metaphorically in terms of, well, there's these human beings that inhabit the hell realm as well. They experience only pain. So you can have both of these states. You can think of them as sort of objective worlds, which lots of Buddhists would think of it like that. But you could also think of them metaphorically. Thinking of them metaphorically, this sort of like this unique ability to experience pleasure and pain, and why that gives humans a particular special opportunity for growth, I think is a bit illuminating as well. If we experience only pleasure, we tend to get quite intoxicated with that, don't we? If we experience only pleasure, it's very hard to kind of empathize or relate to pain, people in states of pain. The sort of the God realm folks amongst us, they're constantly happy, aren't they? And it can be a bit hard to connect with at times. They can find it a bit hard to particularly to empathize with suffering. When we're particularly young, we can do this, can't we? When things are going very well for us, it's like we can't imagine. We can't. We're almost maybe a little bit of afraid of suffering, it's like it reminds us that it exists in the world. We can't quite empathize with that. So it's very, very important that we have some amount of sort of pain in our experience, even a sort of little bit of unsatisfaction. It doesn't need to be a sort of intense pain, but even a bit of an unsatisfaction that I suppose encourages us to grow. I mean, one of the things when I first started meditating, for example, I better wrap up soon. When I first started meditating, for example, was having had come from depression, I knew, well, I'm not going back there again. So it's always been a sort of very, very strong spur for me to grow and to want to sort of develop a bit. Similarly, if all we experience pain, it's very, very hard to sort of grow in that state, isn't it? It's like all we can kind of do is get ourselves up and going every day. So, and I'll finish on this, one of the things that happens in this whole world, the 6 realms, is that in the God realm, somebody comes and plays the tune of impermanence to the gods. And again, so one of these ideas, when we're very, very sort of up and buoyant, the idea that, well, this will end, can sort of just sober us up and bring us back down and connect us in with human beings again. In the hell realm, what the Buddha comes and he gives a balm, an ointment, to sort of ease the pain, just ease the pain. And of course, that's often what we need to do when we're in intense pain as well, is just like take care of that. And then hopefully some sort of spiritual growth can occur then as well. But anyway, I'll finish it at that. It's just to say that, well, the human situation is a particularly unique situation, a really special opportunity within sort of Buddhist cosmology. And we can understand that objectively, literally, but not too literally, or we can understand it metaphorically as, well, our human state experiencing some pleasure, some pain is a really, really useful one for growth. And we can use pain as a way of connecting with other living beings, in a way of kind of spurring us to growth. And we can use pleasure as something that we want to move towards, but in a sort of healthy way, without forgetting, well, I suppose the suffering that's often inherent in human experience. So yeah, that's it. A little bit longer than I'd planned, but anyway, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Amalayodhin. Yeah,
Welcome.
Firstly, well, very nice to have you here. Anyway,
Mm.
very nice for you to join us. And also, yeah, thank you for your talk on the human situation. Not an easy subject to sum up in 10 minutes. I thought you captured the kind of principles really well. For me, I really like those principles that you got to about Buddhism. And it made me think a bit about, well, there's a couple of principles there, isn't there? First of them was that human life is precious in a way. And you were saying that, you know, in a way that's informed by, well, the tradition of rebirth in Buddhism. But I was also thinking, actually, even if you don't subscribe to the idea of rebirth and that you've got a single life, well, even then, in a way, it reinforces the idea that your life's precious, isn't it? You know, and you've got one life to kind of make the most of.
Right.
Yeah, so I was just sort of feeling it was kind of both ways.
And
then the other principle that you drew out, which I thought was really nice, is this principle of, well, growth, isn't it? I mean, you know, you talked a lot about the Buddhist cosmology, this huge kind of scope and spectrum of Buddhist kind of cosmology that's been informed by, well, you know, its growth, its culture that it grew up in, and all of that. I mean, personally, I really like that magical realm. Like, I want to inhabit a realm with ghosts and spirits and so on. But even then, you know, that principle of just change is possible comes through, doesn't it? Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't particularly have any reflections on that, but I just wanted to just kind of, in a way, pull those principles back out again, because I thought they were so clearly articulated in a way. Yeah.
I mean, it is somewhat liberating, isn't it, to think that sort of like, well, energy is the primary thing. And I think actually, you know, again, if we understand those various realms just metaphorically or poetically, I think it still all stands true. You know, it's like we sort of like in our mind we inhabit these various realms at different points of our life, or even at various points of our day. You know, sometimes we're hugely competitive. Like, say for example, London. I feel like, you know, there's this, if people were here last week, they talk about the Titan realm, the Ashura realm. And London just seems like a Titan realm to me, like extremely competitive, you know, and that comes with a whole sort of psychological world. You know, even if people notice this, particularly during lockdown, mental states sort of just kind of pervade the air, don't they? They sort of perfume the air. So you don't even need to think of it as sort of like beings with a particular form. It's like we create a world kind of collectively, and you only need step out the door sometimes to be able to kind of pick up on that. So you could think wherever you are, you could think of it, if you want to think of it poetically, and think what sort of like devas and gods and goddesses sort of inhabit this kind of space. You could think of that like sort of objectively like that, but you could also think, what's the kind of world that we just sort of create together? Like the start of lockdown was so anxious. Like, you know, I used to go running around Victoria Park, and, you know, people were getting so angry with each other. You know, it was definitely, there was a sort of tinge in the air that we were all kind of creating together. So I think, you know, it's definitely, even if you wanted to think in terms of this life and very much in terms of just even kind of normal, kind of mundane psychology, I suppose, and interactions between human beings, there's definitely a bit of magic to it. And it's something a little bit mysterious as well. Like, how is it we sort of create these worlds together and pick up on it so sort of readily?
We're sort of so sensitive, aren't we, to what's going on around us? And, you know, it's so easy to think of what's going on in your head as your kind of private business. And actually, if you don't let it out, it doesn't affect anybody. But it's so easy to affect the people around us, isn't it? You know, like just say that aura, that atmosphere. You walk into a place, don't you? And you can feel kind of whether a place feels good or not. You know, and you, like lots of people say that about Buddhist shrine rooms. You know, because you have lots of people meditating in there, suddenly there's a sort of feeling about it, even if there's no one in there. You know, or like I live in a Buddhist community, and quite often the comments that people coming in here is that there's something kind of nice. There's a good feeling about it, because of course we're practicing a lot of our ethical behaviours together. We're good friends, you know, we support each other, we look after each other. It sort of permeates the walls of something, doesn't it? You know, but the opposite's also true, you know, the negative as well. So you get a sort of sense, it's a bit like when you walk into a place that hasn't been lived in, isn't it? You know, you don't get that lived in feel, which just seems to be a sort of reverberation of kind of like human beings being there and living in there. So as nice as the place is, if it's never been lived in, it kind of comes with that, doesn't it? It kind of has that sense to it. So let's get back to this principle of like why would we want to change? You know, you presented that kind of continuum of consciousness. I mean, even, you know, I'm an ex-scientist in a way, and studied the mind and consciousness myself. And you know, there's no kind of controversy in that idea that there's a consciousness hierarchy in animals in a way. You know, well, microbes, organisms, lower animals, higher animals, humans. You know, I guess where Buddhism goes one step further is it says, well, we can go further than that. You know, our human consciousness can go further than that. I guess maybe if I can put you on the spot a little bit. Sure. So why is it that why would anybody kind of listen to that in a way, you know, or how, what was it for you that kind of made you think that was really viable for the first time, you know?
Well, I think a way a lot of people come in to discover Buddhism is the people they meet, isn't it? It's like you meet somebody. You know, some people, I suppose there's various different levels that you connect. You can kind of connect with it intellectually, like you can read it and go, this is true. Like, I really think this is true. You can have more of a faith or a heart connection with it, where you see a Buddha image, like, or you walk into, you know, you go to Sri Lanka, for example, and see the amazing, beautiful Buddha rūpas there, the statue stone carvings. And you get a kind of heart response where something symbolically sort of sets it off in you. But also you can meet people, and that, you know, that was the thing with me. And I remember I walked into the Dublin Buddhist Centre about 9 years ago now, around this time, and I met Vajrashura, who was leading the class there, and there was just something about him. You know, I just thought, there's just something about this guy. What is it that he has? And I've met, you know, lots of people like that in my time since, where you just go, oh, there's something so impressive about you. Not necessarily even just Buddhists, because Buddhists don't have a monopoly on this by any means. You know, people from all walks of life, and you go, there's something so impressive about you. How is it that I do that? And the Buddha says, well, you can. You know, you can develop all of those qualities actually. So yeah, there's something to do to doing it, because for one extent that involves less suffering for ourselves, but also, you know, we can be a force for good in the world, and we can kind of contribute, I suppose, to something, that perfuming of a positive atmosphere.
Yeah, no, I think that's very good, isn't it? And I'm reminded of this sense of, you know, I think I don't know if it's kind of apocryphal or something, but I've heard, you know, there's a saying that the Buddha said, well, you don't have to take my word for it, effectively, go and try it yourself, you know, go and try out my teachings. And I remember the first time, like you, I came into the London Buddhist Centre and you know, met some people that impressed me. I wanted to know what that was about, and in a certain way, you've got to kind of give it a go, haven't you, on a bit of faith in a way to start with. But I remember I wasn't a very good meditator to start with, but I remember the first time I had a kind of deeper meditation experience after about maybe 9 months of coming along to these meditation classes or so, and kept trying, and then you know, at one point I had a slightly deeper experience of meditation, and suddenly I sort of, it made sense in a way. I had, for the first time, I had a bit of my own experience of something, a consciousness that's a little bit better, a little bit higher, because of course we can all get that experience ourselves, can't we? You know, we have good days and bad days, and sometimes we can lean into something and have a little taste of a higher level of consciousness, even if it's just for a moment. You know. And of course,
with probably the most likely situation that will happen is, again, collectively, isn't it? Like, did you have that experience amongst people?
I did, yeah.
So, and I think that's very common as well, is particularly when people go on retreat and like take themselves off to a group of with a group of people who are meditating together and in silence together and doing ritual together and all of those things. And again, something kind of collectively gets built, whereby individuals within that situation it can get a taste of something bigger or something broader. And of course, when you get it, it's like, oh, why, you know, this is great. You know, why wouldn't I? Of course, I want to move towards this. You know, it's something of far more beauty and openness and connectedness than our kind of normal day-to-day experience. But yeah, it seems to get done collectively, communally.
That's interesting, because it also reminds me of, because I'm not, like, in a certain way, I'm not one of those people that goes after the kind of pleasure experiences. I think for me, I'm much more likely to move away from pain, if you see what I mean.
Right.
I find I'm much more incentivized by the fact of
more stick.
Well, that's it. Yeah. If I'm suffering, I'm more likely to practice harder in a way. But I know that other people are inclined the other way in a way. But I think there's room for both, isn't there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I suppose some of us are more kind of hedonically inclined, aren't we? Where we kind of like where we chase pleasure, but I mean, whatever. It's interesting. Apparently, in the hell realm, in this particular hell realm, you know, you've got this idea that you've got Buddha seeds, which is the idea there's a certain amount of potential for enlightenment in each realm. And the hell realm has more Buddha seeds than the God realm. So you actually have more potential to grow when you're in very, very strong levels of pain than you do when you're sort of just totally blissed out, because what's wrong with that? And why would I make any effort in that state to change anything, you know? I think it's true where, there definitely seems to be something more of potential in that particular element. There was something I was going to say about that. It might come back to me in a second.
Well, I mean, I think about all of the things I'm kind of pleased with in my life or happy with, all came out of a bit of grit. All needed a bit of a struggle in a way, or a bit of a tension at least, in order for me to kind of work against. I think it's so interesting, that sense of, if everything's going well for you, you just, in a certain way, you're just a bit dozy, aren't you? You just sort of coast along and not try to, and of course it runs out and then you're inevitably unhappy or whatever.
That's right. Or just a bit arrogant and aloof and disconnected, that can happen as well. But that was the other thing I meant to say actually, is that, I think also as well in talking about kind of like the opportunity in pain or painful states, is that it's really emphasized that actually it's an opportunity. Like you can really use it as an avenue to growth and to more states of wisdom. But it doesn't happen just in and of itself through suffering. That it is actually an opportunity to practice that gives you, just a real opportunity, I think.
And I think that's the other point I wanted to draw out in a way from what you were saying. That's what we can kind of apply, isn't it, in our day-to-day life in a way. Like we can just look for those opportunities, in order to in order to grow. And they don't have to be grand, do they, in a way? They can just be a little extension of what we're doing now in a way. Why am I feeling hurt? Why am I feeling like upset? Right. Why am I feeling left out? And just seeing if we can slightly respond more creatively to those situations, rather than just sort of acting out like we might do, or whatever it is that your habitual patterns are. I'm sure we've all got them. But it's like I really like taking these teachings and just kind of whittling them down to, okay, what do I do? What do I need to do?
Yeah, definitely. And it is, because usually suffering or pain will come down to some sort of story about me at the end of the day, won't it? So it's an opportunity in some ways just to kind of drop that a little. Not to say that there's nothing objective in pain or suffering. We could be ill, all of those things. But usually we bring a sort of a story into it of why does this happen to me, or why am I this type of person, or we personalize it in some way and make it about, we sort of identify with it and make it about ourselves. So, each time we do that, of course, there's that teaching of the second dart, where the Buddha talked about it. Well, you've got this first dart, which is pain, and pain, of course, is inevitable in any human life, because we get old, we grow sick, we die, all of those things, and people around us do the same. People that we're close to and connected with do the same. So pain in that sense is inevitable. But the Buddha talks about this idea of the second dart, where we then load onto that a resistance to that, a fight against that, a sort of why me? What does this say about me? Why did those people do it to me? All of those things, which in itself causes much more of our pain on a day-to-day basis, and our suffering on a day-to-day basis. So pain and suffering is a really good opportunity to look at that, isn't it? And where we cause ourselves so much suffering and pain inevitably, because we just load it on top of pain that's already there.
Yeah, great. So I think we should wrap this a little bit up, but thank you. Really engaging talk as well, and discussion. So thank you very much, Amalayodhin. Great. So I hope you enjoyed that Dharma Night talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a class, a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving, you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set up a standing order, a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that, and that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.